great news. TYT is partnering with Participant Media to help solve the climate crisis, but we need your guys' help. Make sure you check out our series, 10 Days of Action, to learn more about what you can do to make a difference. And also go see an Inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power. It's in theaters nationwide right now. It has a really important message, and I want all of you guys to learn that and absorb it. It's very important. And look, if President Trump isn't gonna lead, then we should. And I believe in the American people, and I think we can do it. Already, the majority of Americans are on our side, and so are civic leaders, mayors, governors, and businesses, and they're all moving forward to stop climate change. So don't worry, guys, no single person can stop us. If we fight together, we can win. So I pledge to join the movement and hashtag #BeInconvenient. Go to inconvenientsequel.com/action to be part of the solution.
Martin Shkreli, person whose name just makes you want to punch him already without even seeing him. Martin Shkreli was found guilty today on 3 of 8 counts of fraud. He faces up to 20 years in prison. He has not been sentenced yet, so it won't necessarily hit those 20. Oh God, there he is. I just want to pinch his cheeks and punch him in the face at the same time, but I won't. I will show restraint. Okay, so the case, what was the case? You've heard everything about Martin Shkreli being the guy who raised the price of a pharmaceutical 5,500%. He did not get convicted for that. Actually, what he was convicted for was a fraud case against some of his investors. He runs 2 hedge funds, one MSMB Capital, the other MSMB Healthcare. And what happened is he got sued for essentially illegally using he got prosecuted for illegally using money from his pharmaceutical company to pay off his hedge fund investors and lying to them along the way as to how their investments were doing, essentially buying time before he raided his pharmaceutical company to pay them. The evidence as presented by the New York Times coming from this case included a threatening letter he sent to the wife of a former employee, statements he sent to MSMB investors showing great returns. At the same time, he had no money in fund accounts, 3 versions of a backdated agreement to make it look as if MSMB Capital had invested in Retrophin, which is his pharmaceutical company, when it had not, as well as claims about assets under management that were wildly out of line with his actual fund size. So he lied about how big it was.
You know, history is great because it teaches you to not make the mistakes that were made by certain individuals in the past, right? You don't even have to do any extensive research into history. Like Bernie Madoff is in prison right now because of his Ponzi schemes. Like, it's funny to me that he thought he could get away with this, and I'm glad he didn't.
Right, so yeah, this is a lawsuit 4 years in the making. And one of the great things to look back on is throughout the lawsuit, he had said a bunch of different things, including this one, which was, I'm so innocent. The jury, the judge, and the prosecution are gonna give me an apology. Yeah. So what is your takeaway on Martin Shkreli after this?
You know what, he reminds me of the quote from Malcolm X, the chicken's coming home to roost. Because I remember him bragging about that Wu-Tang album, that cash rules everything around me. You know, when I think about, I have a friend who's HIV positive, who actually acquired or contracted HIV through a blood transfusion many years ago. And when I think about his struggle in life, and just a very hardworking person, and his medication being jacked up with this amount for this amount, somebody who thought it was cool and was so smug about it. You know what I mean? It was just like the whole time, every single interview, you just showed me one. Every time you see him, it's like this smug, you know, like haha, above everybody. Like it's cool to be slimy thing. So when things like this happen, it makes you feel like, oh, sometimes there is justice. You know?
Right. I think it takes a certain type of person. And look, I'm not a mental health expert and I can't diagnose people, but sociopaths can comfortably screw people over when it comes to their life-saving drugs, you know, and you're right, he was completely unapologetic about it, incredibly smug and defiant. And so they had a really hard time finding jurors for this case because so many people knew who he was, absolutely despised him. There were people who didn't even know who he was and said that they found him like strange or questionable on face alone, which I thought was interesting. We covered that story as well. So look, I just want justice to be served.
Yep.
You know, I don't want to go after people in a ridiculously aggressive way. I just want fair justice, and hopefully in this case, now that he's been found guilty, you know, his sentencing will reflect that.
But what's so crazy, definitely when I heard 20 years as a maximum for what he could be sentenced for, I took into consideration what actually his defense brought up, which is like the people he defrauded them not out of money. He just lied to them along the way. At the end, they got paid more than their investment. He lied to them along the way. And one of the weird things is, yes, I want this guy, I don't care what happens to him personally. I just feel like in a world where we're fighting so hard for like healthcare reform, so many people are focused on like the healthcare law and the way that the health insurance industry is structured, without really getting a lot of talk about the insane rising cost of healthcare in the first place, that just keeps going up and up, and so the people have to pay more and more and more, and we need to solve it that way. But this case was not about raising the price of a drug, for Retrophin, on people who need it.
I mean, there are so many lawmakers that are complicit in that type of behavior. We see it all the time. The mistake that he made is he got too greedy and he increased the price too much. But you have pharmaceutical companies behaving that way on a regular basis, and they're protected by our lawmakers because they are in the pockets of these lawmakers, and that's the frustrating thing. And you're right, you know, we have these discussions and these debates about healthcare and the rising cost of healthcare in the country, and then we talk about how we can restructure things and have cost controls, and all that stuff is important. But what's also important is to shift the focus on, you know, the price gouging that happens within this world. You know, whether it comes to pharmaceutical drugs or doctors overcharging for things, that's a big problem. There are certain procedures where I'm like, I know that this doesn't really cost that much.
I just got a bill from a doctor that was ridiculous. And I will say that, because I know some of the people are gonna get really weird about me saying that the dude is ugly, but I truly believe that real ugly comes from the inside out. And this is when you do dirty business with dirty people, that's what happens. And so like what you're saying, a lot of people are doing this, and he happens to be the fall guy because he got above himself. He thought that he was beyond the game, that he could walk around and he could just laugh and do these interviews, and and that's why I say it's the chickens coming home to roost, because there was nobody threw in, you know, nobody covered him. He's taking the fall.
And it's good for the argument that health insurance companies and specifically pharmaceutical companies, in addition to saving a lot of lives, seem like they're out to get you and are, you know, being evil and raising the price. And he feels, you're right, just like a character, like a completely heightened version of reality that we can all kind of gravitate toward, and now we have a face that goes with it. But the details of what happened during this case, like he would go out immediately afterwards and talk to the press, and the judge had to say, you gotta stop doing that. And then he also, during like the closing arguments or something, was reading a book. In the courtroom.
He's unruly.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And then there's another thing that's it's a good thing for the prosecution of these kinds of cases, they said, according to the New York Times, in that these New York area prosecutors have to go up against these super expensive lawyers a lot of the time. And those super expensive lawyers, it's easier to recruit amazing lawyers to your firm if you can pay them the kind of rates that you're gonna end up charging to billionaire pharmaceutical company heads. And so this is a big win for prosecution in the district court.
He better walk into prison quoting that Wu-Tang album, because he's gonna need some help in there.